It's good to see everybody here. So first of all, I'll call on Adam to do the opening Karakia.
Yeah, good afternoon, members. Whakataka te hau ke te uru. Whakataka te hau ke te tonga. Kia makakina e uta. Kia mā taratara ke tai. E he ake ana te atakura. E tau, e huka, e hau hu. Te hai mori oa.
Thank you, Adam. And just for those who are wondering why we open with a Karakia, it's the Regional Council's policy that all meetings and workshops are opened with a Karakia. And if anyone wanted to know what it meant, on page 5 of the agenda is the translation. So thank you for that, Adam. Apologies.
Good morning, everyone. Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Not used to these more afternoons. We've got 2 apologies today. Councillor Eugene Patterson for lateness and Councillor Maxine Van Oosten for absence.
Have we got any further apologies? No, I haven't heard from John. All right. Someone move that. Thank you, Robbie. Seconded. Was that a hand up, Trevor? Thank you. All in favour? They be accepted? Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to confirmation of the agenda. I'm not really seeking general business or whatever that we could provide for something at the end. No. All right. That's done. Well, I'll move that the confirmation of agenda. Someone put their hand up. Thank you, Councillor Story. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Do you want to do that?
I might as well do it now.
Okay, do it now.
Good afternoon. By the way, my name's Dave Doggart. I'm the Democracy Advisor looking after you today. At the start of each meeting, we call for disclosures of interest and we seek you to tell us if there's anything on the agenda that you could have a potential conflict with. And that could be a pecuniary or financial interest or an interest outside of that, just as a general club, group, organisation that you may belong to. I will, after the meeting, circulate an email to you to gather a general disclosure from you all pertaining to financial and non-financial things. Happy to help if you strike any issues with that. Elected members have done that declaration already, so I won't seek them again from you, from them. But what we will do is, in this case, elected members, a lot of their interests are disclosed publicly on our website. That doesn't apply in this case, as you are appointed members to a committee. So those, while they may be discoverable if somebody requested them, and we would discuss that with you in that case, they will be filed internally for council use.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, do we have any disclosures of interest today? Didn't think there would be. Thank you. Now, we've got, I'm not sure if there's any more going to turn up, but I'm happy for those alternate members. Gentlemen, if you want to come to the end over there, rather have everyone around the table. We didn't want to start with them there. Just respecting that there's a difference in membership from full to alternate. Right, so I'm going to, before we get into the members' induction, I'm just going to open with a few comments. So firstly, it's good to see you all in the room. It's the first time we've had the subcommittees up and running this term. And it's I congratulate my colleagues in council of getting these committees established, and just regret that it's taken nearly a year to get you around the table. So in a few minutes, before we get to that induction report, once I've said my comments, I'll just very quickly go around the room and get people to just say who they are. Some of us know each other, others are not. I'm especially pleased to see Doc here, and I'll cover that in a minute. So I know during the last election, a number of us were wanting to get the committees back to a state where we had them 4 years ago. What worked last term, we wanted to, if we could, get more input from a wider group. And we've got John Franson walking into the room. Afternoon, John, down here, please. So it's good to see us up and running. So council discussed the establishment of these committees thoroughly, and we've combined rivers and drainage under the one roof. It's an integrated catchment, and in the past there were silos, but coming together in the way we are, hopefully we'll get better traction in some of the issues. As I mentioned a moment ago, it's good to see Doc here. When we had consultation with landowners in both the Lower Waikato and Hauraki, the landowners were most particular on wanting to see iwi at the table, Doc and Mercury in the case of Lower Waikato. So it's really pleased that we see you. Welcome down. Waikato Taonui are yet to appoint their members, and I'm not sure where Mercury is today, but hopefully we will see them more often. In terms of reference, they're on page 3 of the agenda. If you look at item 2, what we're responsible for, and this committee is really about the high level stuff, the policy, the governance. It's not about the day-to-day stuff. And I just remind, particularly those of us who are landowners, if you've got issues, please bring them to the attention of staff as they arise. Don't bring them to these meetings because it's not the place for having rats and mice dealt with. We want to lift it up, but there will be times when we get into operational as opposed to just policy and governance issues. So we'll mix it up. And also just a comment that we've talked about amongst ourselves as councillors. At the moment, these committees are constituted under council's structure. There's been questions about the future once we get to the end of the term. At this stage, as you know, most of you, they are not enduring in this format beyond a council term, but we'll be working throughout this triennium to find a way in which we can work as committees in an enduring way, such as ACAC has worked with the regional council and they continue to meet, and we've attended some of those meetings in recent times, and the likes of Central Waikato and North Waikato, Franklin. So we will be working with you to look for options going forward on an ongoing and enduring basis, and they may end up outside of council but as like our council still meets with them and takes the input, etc. So those are my initial comments. I'm not sure, it's not formalised as a chairman's report, but it's just an opening remarks. And so we'll move now to the business of the day. And whilst there's a huge amount of papers in here in relation to this next item, Dave's going to do it in 5 minutes or less.
That's it.
Thank
you. The information in your agenda has been provided largely for reference, so I'm not going to go through it line by line, or else we would be here until the early hours of the morning. What I will do is I'm going to run you through some health and safety stuff. I'm going to give you a quick upshot on how the chamber works, how the meetings work, and we'll run from there. So firstly, if an emergency should occur and we need to evacuate, there'll be a siren, and the emergency exit is out the door over there onto the right. And one of the staff in the room here will give you a heads up on which way to go. If you require assistance being evacuated, let one of the staff members know and we'll be happy to help. Once you get outside onto Tristram Street, don't walk in front of the traffic, as obviously that would not be a good idea. And please remain out of the building until we're given clearance to come back in. There is in the chamber here a blue duress light. That is what a system that should something happen in reception where we need to be concerned, staff may ask you to go into the councillors' lounge on the left or remain in the chamber. So again, just follow instructions. And just to get to the nitty gritty of it all, there is a defibrillator, thank you, Noel, in reception, and I hope we don't need to use it, but it is there should it be required. In the councillors' lounge and in the main corridor, there's a flip chart with all of the emergency stuff in it if you feel so inclined to read it. I'll move from there to the chamber tech and the meeting stuff. Firstly, the meetings are recorded and the recordings are posted on the website along with the agendas and minutes. The exclusion to that, however, is if we have any public excluded items, those do not get publicly released unless a resolution is made to release them at a later stage. In front of you all is a microphone, much like mine. When you wish to speak, press the right hand button on the microphone, and as Robbie's done here, it'll glow red. After a while, when you get into a queue, we can have 4 speakers at once. The next in the queue gets a green flashing light. The next in the queue gets a solid green. When it's your turn to speak, the chair will let you know, we'll call on you to speak. And once you've finished, just hit the right hand button again to turn it off. The trick really is you've got to try and pitch yourself into the microphone. It doesn't work so well if I turn my head and talk over there. And about that far is a good guide as to where you want to be at with it. It can be a little bit overwhelming to start with, but just after all that, pretend it's not there. As far as the process of the meetings go, we will publish an agenda. We aim to do that 5 working days before the meeting. The legal minimum is 2 working days. And those items on the agenda are generally what we will table. There are ways to add late items, but it is frowned upon. Non-urgent items and urgent items can be weighed up quite differently. Depending on the item being discussed, the meeting format that Regional Council has adopted is semi-formal. Discussion and debate tends to occur at the same time. And often by the time at the end of an item, a mover and seconder will be called to undertake some action, and that may be to receive a report, accept the minutes, things like that. It would be very rare that we revert back to the standing orders where we have motions and amendments and all that kind of carry on. And it's only if we really get stuck in the nitty gritties and can't get consensus. And that doesn't thankfully happen very often because the process can become quite confusing. We'll always try to put on the screens around you the item being discussed and the motion that's on the floor, so there's clarity for you to know what it is that we're talking about and what we'll be voting on at the end. And from there, I'm happy to take the rest of the report as read and see if anyone's got any questions.
Any questions?
When there's a lot of lights on, sometimes we're asked to turn them off so speakers you can explain that.
Yep. Sometimes with the speaking order on the mics can get a bit out of kilter, so we'll ask you to turn them all off. If that happens, we do keep a list of who is in the order to speak, and we'll still call on you. It's just to free up the slots. If we, for example, want a staff member down the other end, turn their light on to provide an answer to a question mid discussion.
And you can see the speaking order because on the screen here, numbers, if you actually take note of what number, it's on the back of the, I think there's one here, it's number 1 on this one. So you'll know which one you are in the order. Okay, so any questions? Self-explanatory. All right, I'm just going to digress for a moment from the agenda. No, we need to receive that report, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah,
Now we can.
So I'll move that we receive it. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Robbie. All those in favour? Against? Carried. So we're just going to whip around the room very quickly. I don't want this to take a half an hour. There's about 20 of us in the room. So real short, who you are and where you're from. So start with Robbie. He's chairman of ICM.
Councillor Cookson and councillor for Waiho. Thank you.
John.
John Franson, Te Auhei area, drainage.
Thank you. Right. Use the buttons, guys, because it's been recorded and people online can't hear you.
Trevor Simpson, North Waikato.
Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, Dion Patterson, Department of Conservation.
Thank you.
Waikato.
Kia ora tātou, Greg Ryan, Director, Integrated Catchment Management.
Sarah Leland, Lower Waikato Zone Manager.
Kia ora tātou, Ruben Mills, Land Drainage Manager.
Brendan Manning, Team Leader, Lower Waikato.
Peter Buckley, Targeted Ratepayer of Lower Waikato Waipa.
Craig Stobie from Gordonton.
The Goodright from Akaakaotea. We have to put up with all the water that you fellas send down our way. We're the last ones. That's where we're from.
Campbell Sugar, also from Otago.
Brendan Ball, Targeted Ratepayer, Franklin, Waikato.
Chris Willerton, Targeted Ratepayer, Franklin, Waikato. Taupiri, live at Taupiri.
Craig Graham, Targeted Ratepayer from Taupiri.
Waikato, Pamela Story, constituent councillor for Waikato and alternate on this committee, but here in place of Tippa.
And Regional Council Chair.
Kia ora tātou, Adam Munro, Manager, Flood Protection, Land Drainage.
Noel Smith, Waikato constituency, Deputy Chair of ICM with Robbie as Chair. So thank you for that. Now, and where we are we're at the work program.
He's online. He might want.
I'm sorry, I'm just reminded. Will, are you there? Come in from outer space.
Yes, Will Murphy, I'm here. Targeted Ratepayer, Lower Waikato.
Thank you, Will. Apologies for missing you.
Okay.
All right, so now we've got the work program report, and that's on page 110.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just by way of introductory comments to the program report that's in front of you, it does follow a slightly new format that some of you might, I guess, note from previous committee meetings. I just want to also acknowledge that we have Sarah Leland here, the Lower Waikato Zone Manager, and Brendan Manning, the Team Lead for Waikato Operations, and also Ruben Mills, who's our Land Drainage Manager, who has assisted in the compilation of this report, and are also here to help with any questions or further details that might be asked by the members. We will take the report largely as read, but I just thought I'd quickly outline, Mr. Chairman, just around the structure of the report. So it does cover off the key activities regarding our flood protection land drainage programs across the operational and capital work areas. There are some emerging issues that are noted in the report, particularly for land drainage around the freshwater regulations and also some policy work that we've been working on. And there's also, I guess in the appendices, there is a further breakdown of the operational and the capital work program as well for members' benefit too, which is a new format and I think works pretty well. Also, I've noted in the appendix, which I think we probably do need to, I'm looking at Councillor Cookson perhaps to introduce as a short memo regarding the pump station power supply options that was raised at the previous meeting. So we might want to spend a little bit of time on that one, Mr. Chairman. So for now, if I can maybe hand over to Sarah just to outline a few key highlights from the report from her perspective, and then maybe Ruben, yourself and land drainage, and then we'll take some questions around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So I think if we jump to attachment 3, which is on page 121, that's a summary of the operational work program. So you'll see on the left-hand side all of the assets there, and then the number under the asset naming is the number of assets that we have of that type, just to give you an idea in terms of, I guess, how many assets we have out there. And then you'll see those split across the actions that the team undertake in terms of monitoring, and then the works to deliver on maintenance, whether that be a repair or a replacement or an upgrade. And with a lot of what's detailed here in the program is what we have as routine monitoring and maintenance items. Obviously, through that routine monitoring, if we identify issues, then we end up, taking maintenance actions to address those. And then attachment 4 details the Lower Waikato Flood Protection Program also, but this is our capital program of work. So it includes what we are delivering in terms of construction, but also what we're working on with scoping, design and investigation as well. Our major capital projects which are on this year, I'd highlight is we've got the vessel construction and mooring upgrade, we've got the Churchill East pump station, and we've got the Pangarehu Canal rock lining. And just lastly, as Adam noted, just some feedback there captured in attachment 5 around the backup power supply options, which was raised at an earlier landowner meeting. So that's probably all that I'll note on the flood protection program at this point, but happy to take any questions on that.
Questions at the end when everyone's spoken, and we'll work through page by page if there's questions. So Ruben, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you can see in the report here, I guess the work programs have been set for the year, and they're primarily around, I guess, the weed spray and machine cleaning. Some of the areas we've delayed the weed spraying a little bit just to get a little bit more growth there to accept the spray, and I think we let the team at ACAC know that last week when we met at our landowner meeting. Up through there, so yeah, we're into the work. The teams are engaged and the teams are engaged and excited out there. We do have a bit of rain coming through and a bit of wind around still, so that affects our spray programs. And some of our, I guess, our clearance programs have started fairly early to clear blockages and trees that have come down through the high winds earlier in the year. So there's that sort of work still going on around the place. And I guess the other thing that's happening as well is that we're getting a lot of inquiries in from I guess from not necessarily from targeted ratepayers, but from general public around work that they think we can do for them. So there's a little bit of, people have a drain that's blocked by their property, they'll ring the district ring us, tell them to ring us, and then we have a look at it, reply. And then generally it's either a roadside drain that might be a district drain or it might be a private drain. So we've got some reasonably good contact with the district councils now where we will let them know that, there's an inquiry coming back to them, because what we don't want is our, our customers or our constituents being bounced between councils on issues. So we've been working hard on that to make sure there is some, there is some contact there and people can get a reasonable answer around that. I guess the other emerging issue that's come out really is urbanisation. So we do have a lot of urbanisation and rural style living, urban rural living coming out into the subdivisions, and that is causing issues. And some of the places are like Narrawahia North, Te Kowhai, in various areas like that, Martingi, where the level of service that we would provide for the rural, for our farmers, and the rural one is to get the water off the paddock in 3 days, but that doesn't work for in the urban situation. So we're sort of looking at that, bringing that to the forefront and developing a policy about how we deal with that. And some of that will be about handing some of those areas back to the district councils to manage. So we're just looking at that process now. And the other one that was emerging was the self-administration in terms of some of the requests for that. So there's some policy that's been developed there that's in a draft format. And that's gone out to the landowner group that's going to be looking at that. And we have a meeting on the 12th to discuss that further. So in terms of that, so yeah, so generally, the guys are out there, they're working, they've got their work programs set for the year. Weed spraying is underway now to get through the autumn summer spray, and the guys are doing the clearing as well. So yeah, so that's the update around the land drainage.
Thank you. And that privatisation landowner group, that will come back to the next committee here for socialisation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess there's the opportunity for the landowner group, representative group, to have a look at it in draft format. And then we've got a meeting set for the 12th of December to receive comments and feedback. Then I guess it comes back here to ICMCS at the next meeting.
All right, thank you. And before we open up for questions, Robbie, can you just speak on the power generator options, please?
So, yeah, I know in discussions we've had out there that you've all wanted to use tractor generators for on your flood pumps where possible. As it's stated in here, there is an issue that if they haven't got breakaway fluctuation, or whatever it's called, that could be an issue with our switchboards and our pumps, that they could actually make them destroy them unusable. So we're still working through that at the moment. I think I said to Greg a week or so ago that is there a possible way of certifying a tractor generator to be able to operate in that? Like, I know when my dad was in hospital, for him to have anything in the hospital, it had to be certified that could be plugged into the hospital. Is there a way of going down that process of certifying a generator to be able to use in that situation, that it's got fluctuations, breakaway, or whatever it is, that it can be used and that it can generate energy consistently, that it's not going to do any damage? So that's another discussion that we have to have. And in the long-term plan, we've also put that option there. Should we be buying a generator for one for the Waikato zone and one for the Karakia zone as our own generation, not hiring generators in situations where we need it in an event? So those options are still there. We're just going through them.
Thanks, Robbie. So if we can go back to the start of the report, page 110. If there's any questions, I'll work through. I'll just call out the page number and please indicate and just let us know what the item is that you'd like a question on. So is there anything on page 110 or 111? You've all pre-read this, so I'm hoping you've got your questions marked. 112, 113. Sounds like an auction to me. 114. No. And for those of you who went on the vessel trip, there's some pictures recording the event. And those of you who are interested in that screw pump coming, I think some of you have been sent the connection to see where the ship is. I saw it move through the Suez Canal recently, and it should be just about into the Indian Ocean by now. Pirates, yeah. So I'm not sure what they'd do with an Archimedes screw, but it's been interesting seeing the progress of that ship. Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, it's concerning page 113, the sort of similar things you mentioned on it, paragraph 35 and to a lesser extent probably 38, just talking about the urbanisation and just the impact that's going to have on the existing scheme, because are we going to get an opportunity to talk? Will it come through to us before it gets signed off? What's the story? Because the concern is there's a lot of subdivisions go in, 10-acre blocks, and then they don't want water running through their property, so they just block it off. So I'm assuming that's what this is talking to?
Absolutely. We've got prime examples, Waikato District, bluntly, in the Te Kowhai case, the drainage manager here provided a letter to the district council that it was a ponding area and subject to ponding issues. That advice was ignored. This subdivision was granted consent. The developer, instead of having a straight drain as there was, has zigzagged it around sections that he provided. So when water's slowed and goes right angles and so on. And then there's just, someone's put pipes in that is too small and slowed it down. And now they've got flooding within the subdivision up to people's garages and nearly into their homes. So that issue's been repeated around. So absolutely, this is where, and the difficulty is we've got the same with the Porter Drive subdivision there. The industrialisation and the hard stand, the water's coming into the Mangaheka stream, and the likes, and other places around the even Haraki. So the difficulty is that are often near the headwaters of a stream or drainage network, and the rural landowners, the challenge is, should they be paying, or should the district be taking that drainage situation back under their control? And like Hamilton City did with Porters, requiring detention ponds and the likes, and letting it flow out at, I think it's about 80% of the previous workflow flow maximum. So it's a piece of work that's really raised its head in these subdivisions. And yeah, it'll come back through this committee, won't it? Yes. So,
because also with the new rules with the fresh water, with ponding, as you're talking about it, I think it's 3 days of any more than ponding, you have to fence off. It's all these rules coming through. So it can have a huge impact, to our land. So, yeah.
Yeah,
but make sure that that's quite clear.
Yeah, and that's where wanting the likes of DOC around the table is that there are new rules. We're not sure what the new government's going to do, so we're all waiting to see where that's going to end up. But this is all partnership type stuff, and we all need to be in the room listening to each other's issues, and hopefully we can, by having closer relationships, move these issues forward. So absolutely, our staff are on it, and yeah, they're engaged with Waikato District in particular that I'm aware of, and across in Matamata-Piako. So Robbie.
Our chair, Pamela, one of her big things is that we got to have a spatial plan for the Waikato region. So that is one thing that this council will be doing to help with that we will, to try and decide where communities should be doing that and where they shouldn't be. And so then infrastructure can be built for that water flow to go somewhere. But if they just go and plock it there, and then us as rural landowners have to deal with it, it's an issue. Yeah, so.
If I may, one final point, it's also 40, talking about wetlands, and the same problem could occur where, again, under the new freshwater plans and PC1, we're reclassing wetlands. It might be small, and all of a sudden there's an existing drain going through, this clause goes through, and then no longer allowed to be cleaned, or it's going to back up further up. So I'm not sure how that's going to impact us.
Well,
clause 40.
That's a pretty broad encompassing, but there are specifics where the likes of Waikiri West, where we've recently made a huge amount of progress in what's been an issue for the last 4 years. We've now found that we can go through there, and working with DOC at the moment. We've got a process that everyone's agreed to, and Greg, or somebody take me up to date if I'm getting this wrong, because these have been sort of coming to a conclusion in the last week or two. Perhaps you could speak on, just on a general basis, how.
Waikiri consents.
Yeah, so
the concession.
it's wetland issues and drains through wetlands. It's
yeah. So the issue we're having to deal with is the what they call the National Environmental Standards for fresh water. And they specifically have a whole lot of rules around wetlands, what you can and can't do within that area and within 10 metres of a wetland. So we've been doing a lot of work to understand what those regulations are saying. It is a difficult patch for us to be working in because there's very little use of those regulations in this context. So often we might bounce back to case law to understand how to interpret these things. But we have made some good positive strides in the last probably 2 months, I'd say. In terms of understanding, particularly critical to understand what is the definition of a wetland? How does that relate to the work that we're undertaking, and how does that connect to the these new regulations that have come in? And these are national regulations, so they're not regulations that this council has introduced. They're regulations that the government introduced. But as a council, we need to give effect to them and effectively police those regulations on behalf of the government. So, but we have seen some positive moves for Waikiri West, which is great.
Just hang on to it. And just to add to that, this is absolutely an evolving space. You've seen the announcements from the coalition agreement. The devil's now going to be in the detail, and we don't expect to have that for 2 or 3 weeks. So some of us were discussing over the last couple of days, and even over lunch, we were talking about getting, as soon as we can, a substantive briefing to all of council, because it's going to, well, it will affect our work streams, potentially long-term plan content. So as soon as we can get the detail from the new government, we will be no doubt in more meetings. Yeah, see, life of a councillor at the moment seems to be all meetings. So, all right, Greg, and then I'll come to Brendan and then to Trevor.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, I guess just to point out that every drain is different for us in terms of our network. They do interact with wetlands differently. We have had a positive outcome for the ones through Waikiri West, but we do have a number of other drains in different situations that we have to treat on a case-by-case basis. And we're doing that at the moment in terms of just understanding exactly where they fit within these regulations.
Thank you. Brendan.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, and thank you, Greg. I guess it's worth noting, and further to Noel's point there, that National Environmental Standards, NPSFM 2020, everything's up for review and maybe repeal. So all I would caution is that council was very mindful of where staff efforts are being spent, and I'm sure you're all mindful of that. It is, after all, ratepayers' dollars that are being spent. So we're not going to go round and round doing something that then we have to unpick all over again, and particularly when it comes to uncertainty around whether do we need a consent to clean a drain or not, because I'm not sure. In my mind, I would have thought we would revert back to earlier legislation, or in the absence of anything that's clear at the moment. Would that be fair to say?
Well, no one's clear about, and at the moment, nothing's been repealed. So we're in a quandary in limbo, really, because we've got existing law. But we are mindful, and in fact, Brendan, your words are basically the same as myself and others in the table over lunch today, is that, you know, it's not the stop button that we need to push, but we just perhaps a pause button or a go slow for the next couple of 3 weeks until we get the detail that we need to actually tweak our plans. So we are as conscious as you are of not wasting dollars, and also making sure that we're not going to do work that's no longer necessary. So I'm sure a lot of the work, if I can put it this way, everyone wants to do the right thing by the environment. So everything's not going to be thrown out. It will be a change, but not necessarily a complete outage. So it's the pause button that's necessary right now. And as soon as we get a head around it, council will be moving in that direction. So, all right. So I was going to go to Trevor, and then Peter and Greg, did you want?
Just to provide the assurance of the subcommittee that absolutely, that's the space we're in terms of understanding finding that balance, I suppose, between progressing our work, but also not undertaking anything that might be a little bit more uncertain in this current situation.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Waikiri West, as you've told me not to go into detail, but are we going to have an update, with the people involved as we go forward? Because I get a bit nervous when you say pause, because we're still operating in the rules that we've been given.
But we're not pausing the Waikiri West at the moment. That's still progressing.
And so,
there's, in the wider context of pause, there's a lot of work streams going on.
yes.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is, we said we're not allowed to go into the gory details, but can we have the opportunity, like we're meeting with the team on the 12th of December to discuss the policy on self-management, the Waikiri West one? You and Robbie have been working very, very hard on that. But can we have an assurance that there's an update coming somewhere? Because you know, we've also been looking at the regulations as they sit, and, you know, we think there's you know, ample opportunity to get those drains cleaned under the present stuff. And as you say, the council started off saying a blanket, no, you can't 4 years ago, and now maybe we can. So yes, there has been some progress in the last 2 months, but it's been a long 4 years for those farmers. And you know, it's also opened the door in some way or not, and I don't know where it goes, but, you know, there's talk of compensation and all sorts of things, which, you know, is difficult to handle. But are we having, before Christmas, can we have another get together somewhere?
Yes, and what I was hoping to do today, and that's subject to Greg, and sorry, Greg, I forgot to do this, was when we close the meeting, that we could have an informal session with those who want to just ask questions that aren't on the agenda. So not trying to drop the staff in it, but, you know, we're here in the room and happy to have those discussions with you, Trevor. Greg.
Yeah, and just provide clarity in terms of Waikari Western regulations. We have confidence that we can undertake that work within as a permitted activity. So that has been resolved, and we're moving forward on that basis.
Yeah. So it's been huge progress. And look, Trevor, I'll pay particular note of your tenacity in this area. You were like a dog with a bone, and at times you probably thought you were, you know, putting the boot in. It felt like it at times, but the reality was you were just doing what you needed to do. And I know Robbie and I have taken the cause of the landowners on board, and we've worked with our staff and some of the other councillors in the room and outside the room. So look, I certainly would like to acknowledge your tenacity and perseverance in this area, and the team that was supporting you, Mike and others. So thank you for doing that. And it's not being paused. I can absolutely assure you of that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, but it's not over yet.
We're a long way forward, though.
At this informal discussion afterwards, would you like to invite the dock man to come along?
Absolutely. I think it would be interesting if you wouldn't mind, Dion.
Thank you. That's all I ask.
Thank you. All right. So where was I next? Peter, thank you.
Yeah, just to go back to Chris's, one of his items is I'm on a REIT meeting, advisory panel for the Waikato District Council, and it was raised at Eureka about they were aware that the regional council was looking at maybe putting the drainage issues back to the district councils. One of the issues that came up is that around Eureka there's huge drainage issues with the subdivisions and everything else that's there. And we made a recommendation to the council is that we should actually get the regional council to fix the drainage up before they actually took it over again because of the houses and the other issues that are there. Because it's no point handing it over to a district council who's going to have to go through similar issues and maybe come back. So I just want you to make aware that there is issues out there, and I support Chris's.
One of the issues you would have there at Eureka was part of their Eureka Drainage Board, which came in 1989 to the regional council. It never went to the district council. So to give it back to the district council, they didn't have it in the first place. So I would think there might be some legal issues about giving them something they never had.
All I'm saying is that's what they were brought up at the meeting anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's probably an awareness of our staff too, with the Te Rapa Drainage Board, Eureka, and the likes. In the 89 reorganisation, they were straight to the regional council. So that would need a great deal of discussion and possibly even look at the legislation.
Thanks for the clarification. Thank you.
So it's a shame I've been around for too long. All right, is there any further discussion? Sorry, you go, Craig.
Yes, just in relation to that urbanisation, some of it's happening, I think, in a sense by stealth as it sort of it creeps in and it changes the whole hydrology of the region almost, where groundwater is being affected. See that in the Te Kauai area where lagoon ponding areas have actually have dropped, wells have dropped. So it's sort of a policy thing as to how much you let the city next door impact on the environment that we're trying to farm in, with the reaction times and so on, whether there needs to be some more aquifer recharge as perhaps one of the ways of handling water retention rather than, because total volume of water is going up significantly that has to run through channels.
It's interesting. I live in Te Kowhai, well outside of the urbanisation, and I was the district councillor for that area for 15 years. And I do remember saying to some of the staff at district council is that it would be easier to give it to Hamilton and let them have all the problems that the district has created. But anyway, I couldn't possibly say that, could I? Not publicly anymore. But yeah, we have to be very mindful. And the advice that in the Te Kowhai issue, where Roger Spooner, regional council drainage manager, advised the district of what the issues were there, and they went ahead with not taking into account the drainage or the building heights. There was nothing, and so they've got all these issues. And then the rural network has got to take that increased runoffs from the hard stand areas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Totally agree with that. I just wanted to convey for the members that staff have been spending quite a bit of time working with the various district councils to get in ahead of time. So in the past, it's been we get to know after the fact, and I think you hit the nail on the head that we need to we need to front foot this, and so getting that working relationship with the district councils, particularly with the planners and the stormwater engineers, before they plan a subdivision or plan intensification, that we are working together as a unit, two councils together before the land is even rezoned, and making sure that we've got all those matters on our table first. So that is happening.
If I may, if we could just add roading in there somewhere, because that has a huge impact to rule, the runoff from the water through the land and what that does, the impacts. Like we're talking about the subdivision and everything, but a lot of it's just the drains, but the roading is causing a lot of the issues, new roading that's going through. Yeah. So if we just, we need to actually make that almost a separate thing, how that affects everything, because, it has an impact with all this fresh water.
Okay, thank you. Now, look, I'll just move on to the series of photographs there. Churchill's pump station. I think that's progressing nicely, and I think those are the screw pumps, are they not, for the job? Just remind me, Sarah, they're 18 metres long, about 4 metres high.
Oh, thanks, Greg. Just a little bit under 4 metres. I think they're about 3.3 metres in diameter, and there's two of them. So the second photo there is the one of the Archimedes screw pumps being lifted onto the ship, which was quite
That's just one. That's just one of them. Okay.
Correct. And as you noted before, following the ship's progress, they're well on their way. I think they're hitting Singapore in about 3 or 4 days time. And there's an estimated delivery time of the 24th of December, so just in time for Christmas. And obviously the construction works are underway, and that's what you can see in the first photo there. So the key thing ahead of commencing construction was to have certainty that the pumps were loaded on a ship and en route, because obviously we're just establishing the existing pumps there, being the Pluga pumps, and we have temporary pumping in place. So we obviously need to have confidence that we will have those pumps and be able to obviously put them in place and not have a continued, program of temporary pumping.
All right, no, good effort. And then anyone like to comment on the trip up? Sid, as a landowner, what did you think of the vessel?
Yeah, it was everything I thought it was going to be. I was pretty impressed. Certainly a great stage to go and view it when it's right in the middle of being built. The steel in there is quite incredible, and the accuracy of everything. Well worth looking at. And thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the drivers, Robbie and Mike. Did a good job while someone slept in the back on the way home.
Is there any questions on the vessel? No. I do know that I was at a meeting with a group of people recently and the name Caesar Roos came up. So the idea of naming hadn't really come up before that I'm aware of. So I think that's something that we need to actually think about early rather than at the last minute. And I'm not sure what the regional council has a policy on, but if we can take an action there, please. All right, thank you. And any further questions going through the work program?
Just
Greg.
through you, Mr. Chair, just on the naming, it is a time, it is coming up quickly in terms of needing to confirm a name for the vessel. So we'll work with you on that.
So
because it's needed to be confirmed at a certain stage of construction.
in all honesty, I think this group has a strongly vested interest in the naming and because of the association with the river. Obviously, we've got to do it in consultation with our partners. So thank you. Yeah, it does if we absolutely capture that now. Trevor.
Yeah, I suggested that. So is there a process? Can we put in a submission or any idea, Greg, of how just because Caesar's daughter Jeanette's still alive, and if we have to make a presentation, sell the idea, just need a little bit of notice, not much, but
We'll take an action away to confirm the steps and timing for those.
Okay, so
I could be the point of contact for that option.
Okay.
There will be others, obviously, but
so who's capturing that? You've got it. Thank you.
thank you.
Excellent. So if there's nothing further on that report, just at the end there's some of the reserve balance, the cash balances, reserve balances at 30 June 22 through to 23. You can see some movement there. Really,
excuse me, Mr. Chair. Can I just ask a question on page 124? Have we got to that part yet? I just
124. Can you speak up, Peter? Sorry.
Yeah, it's on the stop bank renewals and various conditions and investigation and tenders. Out there.
Bullet point down.
Yeah. I came along the Island Block Road Causeway today, and I see the water level's gone down, and the koi carp have burrowed right into the stop banks there. So are you looking at part of the revision of the stop banks and looking at them? Are you looking at the condition of them where the koi carp have got them? Because you can see they've eaten it right back into the stop bank. And if something's not done, that's on parish polder. If something's not done, something soon, it could actually cause a lot more damage. So I just think that they need to be looked at, those stop banks, and maybe down towards Motor Karakia and all the other ones up in that river there should be looked at for their koi carp damage.
Probably across the whole network. So, all right, we'll capture that point. Thank you.
I'd just like to say in there as well, I've noticed it on the Karakia, same as the koi carp and the riverbanks is with the high water levels, there's some real damage on even the Waikato this year.
Yeah, we'll look in through you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we've got the water levels are receding a little bit too after a very high year. So we're starting to see that damage. So we'll take that on board, Peter. Thank you. Yeah.
Just going to the finances there on 128, 129 or 127 through 129. Those are the reserve balances as they were at 30 June 23. Some of the work, and maybe Greg will capture this in the LTP paper next, but we will be bringing forward at the next committee meeting in February, I think it is, the suggested, if there's any increases in rating for any one of these areas, just an outlook for the next 10 years like we used to get as to movement and if there's rating changes required and the like. So that'll come out with the next agenda. So you'll be able to have a look at, and we'll be seeking feedback from the group as a whole, and particularly the landowner reps as to affordability and all that sort of stuff. But there'll be more. We could probably take some of this out to the next paper and include it in that discussion. So is there any further questions on the works program? Well, thank you for putting that report together.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, couple of questions about the PTO pump, being a user of one and having used it a couple of times with our great power supply we have now. It's done on the hertz and it just ramps up and down. I think the statement will need to be as long as it's spec'd high enough for the requirement, and that's what we need to know more so than it talks about speed and it's got nothing to do with it. It's all about getting the right hertz. And so I think we need to be making sure that if we do use anybody's, that it is at the right KPA,
Yeah.
kilovolts.
So that's the issue. So
Mm.
it's whether we should allow farmers to use their own ones, and they would have to go through a certification process, which could be simply reading the specifications on the side, or with any test. But it's the policy about whether they should be used, whether we should buy generators. There's a number of issues. And of course, you don't want people doing it when you don't know they've done it.
Oh, no, 100%.
And you know, they're scheme assets, so we can't have them endangered.
And the likelihood is that the person who owns it is probably using it on their own shed anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
That's right.
they're in the same catchment area, so
Yeah.
more than likely they got no power.
Yeah.
No, that's cool.
No, totally agreeing. Like cow sheds have got all that data, a lot of my data and everything else. You put a generator on there that it'll just fry that stuff in 10 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if it's going to fry your cow shed, you're not going to put it on there anyway. I totally
Yeah, well, we
understand
hope
that.
not.
But it's assessing it that it's suitable and stamping it. That's the issue.
Trevor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just as a further comment to that, we've had some issues, and the biggest problem is, and why this is on the table, is you can't hire the damn things because everybody else wants to hire them
Yeah.
at the same time. And so council's going to buy one, that's great, or maybe going to buy one, but one between many, the tractor-driven thing, if we can make it work, would solve a lot of issues. But I take on board there's issues, but if rather than a blanket ban on tractor-driven ones, because the real risk is if there's a major, you can't hire the damn things.
And that's one of the reasons we've got whether we should be buying some. But as you rightly point out, if we've got widespread outage, then we won't have enough anyway. So, yeah, it's the environment we are, and we've got to protect the assets.
And again, I mean, buying two or three PDO pumps that we could put a tractor on to me would be a far better source of resources than buying one big one that is a standby.
Yeah.
So there are other ways of doing it because obviously it's spec to the right thing, but yeah.
So Brendan, do you want to jump in here?
Yep, there's it. Yeah, so the generator thing, I guess, is what I was getting feedback was about the automatic voltage regulator. So what I'm hearing is PDO generators won't automatically change the revs to put out more output, but we need to dig into that further. But that's what we're hearing back from the start. So that's where we started from. And then we'll have to go through the story, go through the stages of if a farmer has a generator, then we size it to the pump. But yeah, so we're going through that. Take your point about the generator sizes for cow sheds. It's going to be different for individuals, but we're going to need something like 100 kVA to run most of our pumps. That's quite a big generator. But yeah, we've got to go through that. So what's that? That's what we've got. Yeah.
That's what we run, and so it just idles, and then when the load comes on, it quickly drops and comes straight back up.
Yeah.
So you can ride it with, you turn it on. It's not, getting a detail. When it's not drawing power, it just hums along, and as soon as the load comes on, it's there. As long as you spec it.
It's quite a modern one, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we need to work with farmers to ensure that we've got that standard. Yeah.
Thank you, Craig.
Has the option been explored at all about PTO drive flood pumps as opposed to generating and then connecting into your pump?
I'm not sure if this is going, eh?
Yeah,
so we looked at that. The thinking with the generator option is that we've got the pumps there to pump the water. So the idea is if we can get a power source to it, then we feel that's probably a better option than having a suite of PDA driven pumps. But we would like to have a bit of both. So we did purchase a PDA driven pump in the flood event in February. Worked very well. We use local tractors to run those. But ideally, if we can get a power source there, like a PDA generator or portable generators, then we're better to use the infrastructure that's there. a lot easier to set up. The assets there, it just doesn't have the power. So that's where we want to go. But early days, we're just at the start of it. Yeah.
But it's not, they haven't been outright discounted yet, have they?
The PDO pumps. No, there's still a place for PDO pumps. What we've found with the PDO Dota pumps is the lift. They're good. They've got a spot for them. They work very well at Churchill East. We have 3 going. But when you get into areas like Motor Karakia and you've got a high lift, they're not the answer. There is PDO pumps that can do it, but we priced one and they're about 90,000. So they're quite dear. So that's why we're looking at the generator option versus a whole lot of pumps. But yeah, it's all early days. So it's all up for discussion. Yeah.
This could be a very useful thing as part of the mix for where you've got a very low lift and the ability to sling it in sometimes in almost anywhere.
Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge that Councillor Mohita has come online, and welcome to the meeting, Tipper. Thank you.
Kia ora nō. Apologies for that.
That's right. All right, so I'll move that the report be received. Someone second that? Thank you, Campbell. I think you looked at me. Yes. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So, Greg, we come to the LTP report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. So purpose of this paper is, I guess, just give you a bit of a heads up about the planning process that Council is working through. We do this every 3 years to produce a 10-year long-term plan. And there are a number of aspects to that planning process that I know will be of particular interest to the subcommittee. It is a process that we go through to look at what our work programs are and what resources are required to support those work programs. It's a budgeting process that we run through as well. And so we'll be able to, I guess, give you some insights about what we see as the next, particularly the next 3 years, but out to the next 10 years, what it looks like for our work programs to enable input into that process. Stepping up above the operational side of things, though, we also look at our infrastructure strategy. And so this is our strategy that we have in place for our land drainage and flood protection infrastructure. It's something that we need to do under the Local Government Act. It needs to cover a minimum of 30 years, but we push it out to 50 years because of the nature of our infrastructure and the networks that we have. So we go through a process to identify what issues our infrastructure is facing and what Council's response needs to be to those issues in the short, medium and long term. In this regard, I would point members to the copies that you have in front of you, which is the existing infrastructure strategy. I think it's a really important document to get your heads around for this process, because we are obviously taking a look at those issues and determining where we need to go. One of the particular challenges that we've got is that we do need to invest heavily in our existing infrastructure. And the question which I know everyone who gets involved in these discussions is asking is actually, is this the right investment? Because it does involve multi-million dollars. It does involve long-term commitments to that infrastructure as well. And so just determining, given the kind of pressures that our services are under, is what is the best decision going forward for the community. So I'd encourage members to familiarise themselves. This gives a really nice background to the network that we have as well. What we've also provided you is a copy of the Regional Asset Management Plan. This dives into a lot more detail around our networks. But again, I think it's worthwhile having a look through because it does talk about levels of service that we provide. And this is also a document that is being reviewed as part of this planning process. The last one there is to give you a heads up about any business cases that come through that process. And so what we do as council is we put forward business cases where there's a look for a proposal for additional investment into certain areas or a different way in doing things. And so this is an opportunity for you to get some visibility about what is coming forward in the planning process. As I've indicated, we'll do our best to get you information as it does become available. But the focus really is on heading towards a January timeframe, which is when council will be considering a proposal. The proposal gets notified in April, and then there is a public consultation process that runs through sort of April, May, and an opportunity for the community and particularly yourselves to consider what has been put forward and any feedback that council will need to take into account when deciding on the long-term plan. It's a really big process. Council staff right across Integrated Catchment Management have been putting in a lot of effort into this process, probably for the last year, in terms of starting to think strategically where we need to go. starting to think about work programs, starting to think about the resourcing, looking at the pressures that our programs are under, looking at individual subdivisions, even looking at what's actually needed to sustain those. So this is definitely a quite an important topic for this committee to engage in, and we'll be doing everything we can to get yourselves engaged over the coming months. So through you, Mr. Chair, happy to leave it there. And as I said, there is a bit of summer reading for you all there. I think we have also, there's a land drainage management plan as well, which is there as well. So our land drainage plan provides a bit more of a deep dive into our drainage levels of service for you to have a look at as well.
So thanks for that, Greg. So it also notes in Greg's report that there may be homework sent out to you over the Christmas New Year period to look over and provide feedback when we have our next meeting, because that will be the crunch one to get projects into the LTP, what our priorities are and the likes. So those of you who wish to give it more thought, please do so. It's our probably our major opportunity in the 3 years to influence the program and the expenditure. Bearing in mind that the farming community is taking the hits and our wider community are taking hits, and the new government is saying they want to get rid of thousands of people from the government service. And so people over the country will be feeling. So rate rises are not really palatable. So we will be having a very interesting balancing act between the need to do things and the ability to afford to do things. So there's no caveat on the saying that we're not going to spend any more or that there'll be rates rises or rates cuts. I think rates cuts are a dreamland stuff because you actually go backwards. So, yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I've got the copy of the annual report here for and on page 151 it says about flood protection and control works, and I'm reading through some of the material that you had, and the general rates and uniform charges for the flood protection is 3,235,000. Targeted rates is 22,163. Subsidies and general rates is 3 million. It comes to a total of 34,800,000, and in 2022 was 28,448,000. Payments to staff is $14,297 in 2023, and in 2022
So Peter.
But what I want to know is when you're actually going, and I think we've got to look at our investments in there. What's the percentage goes into the operating costs of for doing the internal charges and overheads for it, because there's a cost that goes into there. So what percentage? So if you've got to spend $5 million on renewing some stop banks, does any of that charge go into overheads?
So perhaps I know where you're going with this. I think the reality is we had a discussion at the finance meeting yesterday, and we sought from the finance director a understanding of what the burden costs are. I think that's the term that was used. The burden costs as to, there's one example that was on the table that for every dollar spent on actually doing the work, about $1.27 or $1.47 was spent making sure the work got done, the administration costs. So that's not acceptable to those who are around the table. And we've asked staff to bring information back to the council table on what the cost structure is, and with the intention, I believe, if I'm maybe taking a liberty if I speak for other councillors, but certainly from my perspective, as I was asking some of the questions, was that we need to look at better ways, more efficiency in this council to drive those costs down to get the work done. So that's probably the answer that you're going to get at the moment. We are fully aware of the cost structure that's in behind it, and we are not happy. We've asked for explanation, and until we get the explanation, we're not really in a position to comment further, and it would be presumptuous to do so. Yep. Okay. So we've got a good man here. So Chris, you've got the floor.
Yeah, we'll have a follow-up question. So who owns the land from either the fence for a board drain to the river or to the drain, or in the streams as flood protection? who owns the land between the fence and the stream? Is it the farmer, or is that the regional council, or is it DOC, or is it varied across the schemes?
The landowner owns the land unless the regional council specifically owns that parcel of land.
Because it's just with the ETS, they're now allowing woody plants to be part of the class as a tree. And so from this committee, I was just wondering whether that could then be subsidised. At the moment, it's not in it, but whether that could then be subsidised against our costs.
Sorry, can you take your button off?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, one of our CE's KPIs this year is actually to look at how we can move our land drainage and flood protection activity into a carbon neutral space. And part of that is looking at how do we maximise the kind of opportunities for credits that are available. So we have a piece of work underway at the moment to better understand what the current state of play is, how it's changing. As you say, there are different areas in and out. And so we can get an understanding of how that relates to the work that we do, how it relates to the other work that we do as well, because we have a large restoration program as well. You know, last year we put in about 1 million trees into the ground across the region. And so you're right, there is an opportunity to look at how we can offset our costs in that regard.
So look, I've got the speaker in order here, Craig, Brendan, Robbie, and then Tipper. So can those take, yep. So Craig first. Yeah, so we've got the answer. So now it's Craig.
Yeah, my question in relation to recently the long-term plan. Recently, there was a peat survey completed, which is now sort of about 50 years on from when the last one was done. Has there been any modelling done as to what the future shape of the land drainage system is going to be impacted by that? So just to know how that's been taken into account.
Through Mr. Chair, I can't speak specifically to that action. What I can say is that we do have that specific project underway in terms of understanding our peat resource and what's happening. What I could suggest, Mr. Chair, is that there may be some interest in the committee in getting a briefing on that particular project.
Yes, well, can we capture that? Adam, did you want to say something on this?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just basically was going to say what Greg said. We have captured LiDAR again across the region, and we are using that as good intel to help inform our land drainage programs going forward. Because with settlement, obviously our drainage patterns do change, and so we need to be quite strategic around that. So we are looking into that as part of our urbanisation work as well.
So can we bring a report back? Just give us an overview.
We're happy to provide a briefing back to this group,
Please.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and in the meantime, through Mr. Chair, Craig, if you've got any specific questions, I'm happy to take those and get them into the right part of the organisation for you.
Thank you. I've got a particular interest in that area.
Yeah, I think without disguising too much, Craig, I think you said to me you've got a master's in the peat soils of the Waikato and all things that go with that. So he's a man. If you know anything about peat, Craig is our man. So thanks for that. A good question. So briefing paper to come back. Thank you. We have then Brendan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to your point there around the overhead of, you know, when $1 is spent, if it costs more than $1 for the admin part of it, there's seriously something wrong. So I think we all note that. Anecdotally, also, I think that some of the capital projects that we will have to undertake in the next 50 years, you know, we've got a capital program there of, in the long-term plan, of $1 billion, and then we've got a couple of $1 billion of operating cost. You know, that's a huge prize if we can sort of economise on these projects wherever possible. And again, anecdotally, but if we look at the Archimedes screw pump that's being delivered for Churchill East, you know, Sarah and Greg would know through our work on Motor Karakia that, yeah, we're pretty concerned that if Motor Karakia ended up having a pump or a set of pumps, you know, to that, I'll call it gold-plated standard, you know, is there a better way of doing it? And is there a way of doing it that can still be fish-friendly and probably save potentially two-thirds of the cost on the pump, on the free issue of the pumps? And then we have to seriously look at the civil works and what some of these projects are costing. You know, we're pretty horrified in Karakia. I know the other landowners are really horrified as to what a project may cost there. So let's not dive into numbers, but you're well aware of what we're talking about. So if we look at the whole of the drainage districts, you know, I think at this table we need to be very mindful of that, and we need to help council, help staff wherever possible to try and find ways of economising on these projects while also meeting our statutory requirements around environment and other things. So thank you.
Good words. Robbie, and then to Tipper.
I'd just like to help answer those questions. I think myself and Noel and Pamela and Councillor Hughes, there isn't a torch on that anymore. There's actually a serious spotlight on that burden rate that's never had the pressure that any other councils had on it since it's been here. And we are on that to resolve the cost of how this operation works. So you've got that from myself and Noel. We're living that every day in this council, that has to be resolved. And I don't know how we're going to get around it, but we've got to find a better way of how we operate. And thanks very much for the question, yourself and Peter, but it is a real serious issue. So thank you.
And look, we just need you guys to keep feeding into Robbie and I, or Pamela, Chris and other members of the ICM, that, yeah, we need to hear your views. Happy to take calls, hopefully not at midnight. But, you know, this is a partnership between the community and the council. We're pretty open to being approached, as some of you have made us fully aware of. We'd like to hear from you. So that's good. So I'm now going to go to Tipper. Are you there, Tipper?
Kia ora, thank you. Just thinking about some of the learning I've done since I've been on council, but in this area, it's been mainly about the level of service received and the cost of that service, and trying to get value, extract more value out of that. I'm wanting to understand that those schemes that went to self-administration just in the last period, well, they haven't done it for too many, if either of those have increased the sense of value from one, that they self-administer, so they bear the cost and they know the work that's being done. I'd just like to understand the difference between that way of delivering to what we offer, because it does seem that we offer it at a premium rate. But again, I'm just interested, Noel, in having those models put up as options for us to consider when we get there.
That's a fair
where
point.
possible.
Tipper, that's a fair point. So, Greg, would you like to comment on that at all?
So we did have 2 subdivisions go into self-administration, Blair's and Austin's, I believe. I wonder if...
Well, do you want first-hand view from Trevor Simpson? Thank you. I know you want more, Trevor, so...
You know, well, I'll get there, don't worry. I've only got 6 summers left, so I've got to get there. Tipper, yeah, Austin's is an example. It's a very small scheme. But last year, the closing balance of 30th of June 2020, and this is from the figures here, there was 2,800 in the council budget. This season there's 7,800. June just gone, and I'll tell you how much is in the bank account, which the council don't know about, but there's 6,600, and I think there's another 4 to go in. And so it's a no-brainer. And council have to...
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, thank you.
Council have to learn a different way of management to accommodate self-management. And I call them the red drains, you know, I don't know, modified, artificial, whatever, you know, the report that came out suggested that they may not be allowed to go self-managed. You know, that's not fair. And it's just a different way of management. And we'll be discussing that. Mr. Peters here is already in a scheme that's been many years that has resource consents. So as you say, I don't want to get into the baggage because that's on the 12th of December. But council have to learn a new way of management to accept self-management as much as they can, because it's basically a 50% saving, and it's getting rid of the $1.49 or whatever the figure you said.
Yep.
That's all it is.
Yeah. And look, we will discuss it on the 12th. And the other issue is that, as you rightly point out, it goes to the bigger issue that we talked about a moment ago, is that extra more than $1 to do the work that costs $1. So we'll address the wider issue within council, but the specific issue with drainage we will deal with on the 12th and then come back. It'll end up back here. So is that okay, Tipper?
No, thank you, and I appreciate the response. Thank you, Trevor, for again being so willing to help council find more, again, value out of our processes. Kia ora.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Craig.
Yes, is it timely to perhaps reviewing what's a permitted activity? Because observing what's happened frequently is that there's consents required for something that's then ending up being done with normal best practice, and it wasn't perhaps really necessary, much really achieved by going through a consent process.
Who wants to answer this one? We've had some serious discussions in council. I think we're up to about workshop 6 or 7 for the long-term plan. And one of the workshops I remember, we talked very seriously about increasing the permitted activities and what that would entail. Staff have from that area have basically come back and said that it would take a longer period of time than this long-term plan, but if we wanted to do, if that was the will of the council, that perhaps it would be better to budget to do that piece of work in the next triennium, so that in 3.5 years we have it all, crossed and dotted, so that, and the consultation, it'll be too much of a rush to get it done in the basically 6 months we've got left to do. So it's something that the council laws, Robbie and I and others have raised, and so it's very much on the cards, not off the table. But we accepted from the staffs when we teased it out that it wasn't feasible to do it as quickly as, this council's trying to achieve a hell of a lot in a short period of time. But that might be one that we have to put on for the next triennium.
Thanks.
Trevor?
Mr. Chairman, I would, not sure the right wording, but I disagree with that comment. I think that is most urgent, because another 3 years or whatever, we have to word it as such in this long-term plan or whatever we're doing, that we have to get it underway, because you stay behind when we have, or wherever we're having this discussion afterwards, and that's the classic case, that consent costs, and do we need consents? Because in the drainage thing, it's very clear, absolutely clear, that lots of stuff can be done without a consent. And that's not what's been happening. What does need to happen is the council need to make decisions on behalf of ratepayers rather than go fob it off to a consent process, because that's just doing exactly that, bobbing it off. And that's a huge cost involved, huge cost in that. But if council can make interpretations and decisions in-house, a lot of that cost goes away.
Trevor, I accept your comments, genuinely held. I think some of the work that Robbie and I and Pamela and others are doing with our staff, we are breaking down, and the Waikato West is a classic, because it's our first win. And it's not, as you say, finished yet. We're not at the end space, but that's the commitment that we have made to yourselves up there, and Malcolm and others. But that's what we are doing across the region, so that we can get better outcomes for our community. So I hear your strong comments. I understand, and they words that I articulated myself, that why can't we? And Robbie, it was very much, we are very much aligned And it's really good in this space that we're not at different polar opposites or whatever. So we're very much on the space that we need it done, but the reality is the work program is huge. The costs of doing some things, where does it fit into the program? So we're going to have enough of a job to get that piece of work, permitted activity, into the program for the next 3 years. Hand on heart, we cannot get it into this next 6 months.
Yeah, I accept that, Mr. Chairman, but it's all about policy, isn't it? You know, if council's got some sort of policy,
Yep.
you know, it triggers.
And we've got to consult, we just can't unilaterally move.
And I absolutely, yeah, but the time is of an essence, and I think if somehow or rather we could start working on the policy, because nothing happens unless you got a policy. And so what would be a time frame for people in this room or whatever to get involved in writing a policy that goes into the next possible plan? Because that's just, you lose years writing policies, but it's the policy. So when is the next review of a policy, or when do you add in a policy or whatever? You know, when is the time frame of all this?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So I think what you're referring to there, Trevor, I think we have to sort of set the context. So our land drainage consents are largely set by the regional plan. And so we have to apply for consent. We try and do it on a global scale where we can, so across all networks, spread the cost, reduce the cost per subdivision. We try and lock those in over a longer term. So like a depositional consent for the Waikato Central, for example. So I guess what we've got to bear in mind, yes, there are opportunities to review consents as they come up.
But it's not the consent, it's permitted activities. So it's not consented activity, it's permitted activity. So it's getting council to look at each activity that's undertaken, currently requiring a consent, that could move to a permitted activity. That's the piece of work. It's not the consents that's been raised. It's actually moving to a permitted activity and having greater activity, basically on trust.
Yeah, and I guess we have done that already with some of our river management work, where we do actually undertake a lot of permitted activity work around our, stream cleaning, stability work, removal of obstruction. So I don't know what the timing is on that, but we could look at potentially looking, any opportunity to look at, a permitted activity. We still have to obviously meet quite strict environmental guidelines and outcomes for that around fish recovery, and obviously we need to work with our partners on that as well, with the Department of Conservation and iwi. But I certainly can't make any promises at the moment, but we can absolutely at any opportunity look at streamlining the process so we can ensure that our work's going ahead. Yeah.
This is actually a political issue. It's not a staff issue. Yeah. It's a political will, and there is a certain number of councils around the table at the moment that want to see more activities come within the permitted activity status. So we've accepted that we can't get it into this year's work program for the LTP, but we get it into the LTP for ensuing years, so that we, at least within the 3.5 years, it is, the work's been done, it's been consulted on, and we move it, and the fee will go up, because if you allow more activities, you've got to have more people monitoring. And at the moment, most of the monitoring is going into dairy farms. So if you're going to widen it to a greater number of people, there will be a cost. There always is. So if we can just move on with that one, and we've had Trevor, so we've now got Brendan, thank you, and then Matthew, and then Greg, and then Peter. No, Greg's out.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just on that specific matter, I'm wondering if the subcommittee might, if it might be useful for this subcommittee if we get perhaps Tracy May to come and talk to the subcommittee through what the process is for changing those things. What are the different steps that we have to go through as a council? What are the timeframes associated with it? What is the consultation process? What are the hearings commissioners that get involved in changes to regional policy statements or regional plans? I just think it might be a useful context, because I understand the desire to provide a real a quick fix. This seems really logical. We should be able to do this very simply. It's not as simple as that, and I just think it would be a useful process perhaps. for
I'm
this
happy
committee.
to get a paper on it because Tracy's the director, should be the second highest charge out rate in the building, and happy to get a paper come through, and if we have questions, have you indicate that and then ask her to come to address the questions. But to have her sit around while we get around to seeing her, that's the cost that goes against everybody. So if you'd like to hear her in person, happy to get that, but we'll all pay. We'll pay something anyway, but for every action that takes place in this place, somebody pays something. So what would be the preference? Just in person or a paper plus a paper or a paper plus the person? Which one? Paper only? I think it would be. I think it would be to get that understanding, but I'm just not sure that we need Tracy to hear.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, at what point we all pay for the council staff? And so at what point can we, I hate going to a solicitor because you get paid so much, charged so much a minute. And, the last thing you want to do is be on the same basis coming here, but surely the overhead cost of the quote $28 million or something gives you some benefit as a ratepayer to ask some questions without having to get a bill. Surely, otherwise what's the point, and so, but what I'm looking to have is positivity come out of all these sorts of things, because we're on the same same wavelength of trying to cut costs, everybody. And so instead of negativity coming out, have a positive coming out of these reports or whatever, where, hey, this is where we want to go. Let's all get on board.
Right. So I think, Trevor, what we'll do is we'll ask Tracy for a paper. And if there's any, if there appears to be a need for her to come and take questions or address the paper, we'll do that. So I'm just mindful of time and wanting to move this one along. So good suggestion, Pamela. So we'll take that as an action. We've got speaking now, we've got Brendan followed by Matthew, then Peter, then Craig. Brendan. Someone give him a light, please. Peter, can you turn yours off? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Further to Trevor's point, sorry, Pamela, I may have to disagree here. I'm not sure that we actually need a paper from Tracy, and if we were to see a paper, I want to know what it was going to cost, for one point. But let's go back to the root of the problem. The root of the problem, and what we're looking for a quick solution for, is actually the Resource Management Act. The Resource Management Act is the reason why we actually have paralysis by over-analysis, right? That's where we've got to. So all of our drainage districts, all of our flood protection schemes worked very well until the RMA came in 1991. And then bureaucrats decided that we had to have consents for everything, or maybe we did. But before that, everything was a permitted activity when it came to what it is that our catchment groups do and what the council does in terms of flood protection and land drainage. So if we go back to keeping it really simple, we actually wouldn't need a whole lot of resource consents for this, what is actually just part of looking after our land, looking after our people, looking after our assets. So in my view, we need to go back to that, and central government, and to your point, Noel, it is a political problem. It's something that needs to be solved. Again, I'm not hanging my hopes on a new government, but at least they're willing to look at the RMA and what review is needed. What I would suggest is that this council's energy is better spent going to central government saying we have a problem here where we can't even clean a drain because we think we might have to get a resource consent to clean a drain. And it takes 3 years or 4 years to get a drain cleaned, as Trevor's talking about anecdotally. One example, that's happening everywhere. We can't get anything done without it costing an exorbitant amount of money. We can't get a simple job done. It's really hard on council staff trying to undertake normal work activities in my view, it's pitiful. And this is where we've got to. And I think at this table, I don't think we need more reports. We know what the problem is. How do we solve the problem? So it's not actually a quick fix we're looking for, Pamela. We need to go back to why we've got to this place and how do we solve it. That's my observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. There's a number of you in the room that have some pretty direct contacts to some of the new governors in Parliament. I suggest you talk quickly to those people and try and influence what you can. The Regional Council has a regulatory role and obviously has to conform to certain behaviours. The council will be making their thoughts known through staff as appropriate when necessary. So, but I encourage you, as I've told others most recently, to get hold of their MPs now that they are in the government and speak to them. You need to do that. Well, I urge you to do that outside of this room. So, yes, Brendan, just
thank you. Just to continue your point, so thank you. Also think it would be really helpful if your council, the elected members, could actually get in front of the new Minister of the Environment, whoever's in charge of resource management, local government. They're the people that you need to talk to and say, we have a major problem here. This is our cost burden on our ratepayers, and we're a one council. We are one of 16 regional councils across the country, and with there's 72 TAs as well that all have a similar problem.
Yep.
And this is why everything costs so much. So that is where I think council's time could be really well spent in terms of saying we actually have a major problem here. Can you help us solve it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just like to acknowledge that Councillor Eugene Patterson, Waikato District, has come online. Welcome, Eugene. So we've got speaking order Matthew, Peter, and Craig. Matthew.
Do I just press the button on the right?
You just keep, no, you've pressed, you just talk.
I just want to give an example in Mangatawhiri Compartment 3 as to how money
can we
can
not have battle stories here?
No, this is not this is a really important point. About 3 months ago, we had to have a bearing inspection on our compartment 3 Archimedes screw, and a coffer dam was built so that job could be done. We also were wanting a sluice gate, a capital works sluice gate put in over the summer, but that hasn't been able to proceed because a resource consent was needed to build the coffer dam.
Matthew can just hold. We're getting into war stories and we're getting into detail, low-level stuff. I don't want to turn this committee into bringing up the issues that we can be dealing with on, directly on a day-to-day basis with staff. It's the high-level principles that we really want to hear about. And I don't want to be arrogant and cut you off, Matthew, but we know there's issues with consents. The government has indicated, the government has indicated the new provisions are gone. The RMA is the backstop, but there will be modifications. The work we need to do, rather than looking backwards, we know consenting is an issue, it's costly. Let's now take the opportunity as individuals. I know some of the councillors are talking directly to their MPs, government MPs. You need to be talking to your MPs yourselves. This is a team effort. It's not something that it's the council's job, because the council is you. We represent you. So, and when I was a councillor at Waikato District, when I had heard from people, I could speak more authoritatively on their behalf in the chamber. So we need to hear from you. The government needs to hear from you and your local MPs. So sorry to catch you short, Matthew, but it's really important. We know the consents cost money. We know that things are changing. Council has asked for a briefing as quickly as possible to find out what the key issues of that document that they've agreed to, what the changes are for us, and we will respond as quickly as we can. And we will keep you in the loop in the river and drainage space as quickly as we can, and certainly a much more fuller update in the February meeting. So is there anything that, having said my spiel, is there anything else that you'd like to say, Matthew? Sorry.
I just wanted to say that, the coffer dam built for maintenance work and a coffer dam built for capital works has exactly the same effect on the, yet one requires a resource consent and one doesn't.
Yeah, so we need to sort some of those issues out. Okay, so thank you for raising that. Appreciate it. Peter and then Craig.
Yeah, in the Local Government Act 1974 on the powers of council as to drainage channels and land drainage. And it goes through the council may purchase, make, maintain or enlarge from time to time or alter, extend or repair drainage channels or drainage works constructed under this part of the drainage area and district for that purpose. And it goes into A, the contract with the owner of the private land for and acquire from him by deed or executed a grant in perpetuity to the council of the use and occupation and enjoyment of that land or any part thereof of that purpose, constructing and maintaining drainage channels and land drainage works thereon. Now that was before the RMA. So where does that come into your realm around the table to be able to do what Brendan wants to do or what we want to do without having to have a resource consent? Because that's in 1974. And it's the powers of council. And if you go through it, it's actually quite comprehensive.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's cut it there because we're drifting right away from the LTP. And this is more of the discussion I wanted after the meeting rather than before. But the reality is the RMA section 2A is the killer. And some of us in the room have had to discuss that recently. And it says that the Drainage Act is overridden by the RMA, full stop. The RMA is no longer there, but there has something in its place. So the saving legislation, as they call it, the saving provisions, will have captured that. So the point's noted, Peter, but this is an issue that could be debated round and round and round. And I know Trevor has thumped the table and we've looked at those issues, and that's one of the reasons why we've now resolved, hopefully resolved the issue up there in Waikiri. So I appreciate what you're trying to say, but the reality is there's a bigger issue. So I'd just like to move on from those comments and come to Craig, who hasn't spoken at all today yet. So I don't think he has.
About consent.
So yeah, if it's a particular issue, but if it's about the principle of the consents, really happy to hear about it.
All I was going to, I've never been able to understand why do you have to get a consent every year to do the same thing when you're doing cleaning drains? The staff know what the rules are, the contractor knows what the rules are, and they know what the consequences are. So why does it need a consent, full stop, to do the job? Does that mean you're saying that everybody's incompetent? Or, that was really, that's my big, I can never understand that. When somebody's doing something every day of the week, year in, year out, as a contractor and staff following along, cleaning drains and doing stuff, why do they need consents? They're doing what they do every day of the week. They're not going to fuck it up.
Yeah, so, okay. I'm going to have the last word here with, because I see Adam's itching to push the button. And just globally, that's some of the issues that we have had raised in the discussion about moving more activities into the permitted activity space. So it's been captured, but I'll just let Adam, because I know you had your finger there. You want to say something?
Oh, just to clarify that, so I realise the conversation's been around permitted activity rules, but if you're talking about consent, so I think as I've mentioned before, our consents go over quite a number of years. So I think it's about 35 years, for example, for land drainage. We don't have to apply for consent every year. What we do have to do, though, as part of the conditions of those consents, is just develop an annual works program that we consult with our key partners, which is largely just what we do every year, academic. We make sure that we've got all of our drains identified and we submit that into our resource use department. That's normally ticked off and then we get on and we do the work. So I just wanted to clarify that we don't have to apply for consent every year for business as usual works.
And probably the last word on consents is a couple of months ago, I personally filed an application to the organisation seeking the cost of consents, costs of drainage and rivers getting consents. And there's some more detailed questions in here, but essentially, what is the cost to rivers and drainage of getting consents? The annual costs of those. What is the income for the organisation from consents? What percentage of that income for consents comes from integrated catchment management? I want to understand how much of the business relies on consents from this space. And when I have that, and I'm hoping, Greg, that I have it before Christmas, that once I've digested it myself and shared it with Robbie and one or two others, that it will come to a wider audience. But I put a caveat on it. I don't know what I'm going to receive, so I'm not going to commit to sharing it at this stage. So I am concerned about the cost of consents, and what's been interesting for me, and this is no criticism, I've found it interesting that staff have had to take time to find the information, but there is a system change here that's taken the ability to dig down at the moment, made it much more difficult and slower. So that's nearing an end, I believe. And so we should be getting that information, and I believe it might be interesting. So I hope it's not on consents, Trevor. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, just referring to what Brendan's saying there, I think the pressure to go on the RMA, back to the central government on the RMA and all this sort of stuff. But from our experience in the last 3 months, between you and Robbie and myself and Mike Peters and others, is it's not all the government's fault.
No.
And what has come up quite clear is, I'll say all regional councils, I won't say this one, but it's their interpretation. And we had an example that was spelt out by MPI to you and I. We spoke to them very clearly that there is a huge influence from regional councils on how they interpret the laws. And the regional councils could interpret them. Nobody wants to break the law, let's clarify that. But the interpretation can be a lot friendlier, which results in a lot of cost savings than what they are.
Mm.
And that comes down to, I'm convinced that it's easier not to make a decision and send it down the consent process, because it won't come back to bite you in the bum. And I can't shake that idea. And that's where we have to get a huge shift in management, not to break the law. Nobody wants to break any laws, but it's the interpretation. Yeah, and I don't think it's very friendly.
And look, Trevor, the issues that we were dealing with up there at Waikato West, I'm going to publicly acknowledge the chief executive here. He was brought into the discussions, and this is no slight on anybody else at all, and I'm not intending to be disrespectful to anybody, but Chris came from that area of the business before he was promoted to CEO. Chris's involvement has assisted greatly to get to where we are now. And as you say, it's how it's interpreted. And in a previous life, I used to say to my staff who were members of the Justice Department, I have encouraged you to test the law. I encourage you to stretch the law, but I will not tolerate you breaking the law. Same situation here. We need to have a greater challenge to some of the aspects of our business and test it, and don't go in that breaking the law space. So things take time, but I hope that you can be encouraged from what you've seen of your representatives around this table, the wider table, that we are trying to do the right thing by our community in a way that may not have been done before. And you know, we are putting in some serious hours to do that for you, and we don't mind because we put our hand up to do it. So All right, so coming back to Greg, long-term plan. Is that all that you'd like to say? Would somebody be generous enough to move that the report be received? Thank you, Chris and Craig. All in favour? Against? Carried. That's the end of the business. So I will ask our Adam to say the closing karakia, and then we'll turn the recording off, and then we'll do a general briefing update from Greg if we can, and on some of those issues we discussed earlier. All right, so Adam, would you mind?
Unahia, unahia, unahia mai te uru tapu nui. Kia wātea, kia māma, te nākau, te tenana, te hene naro, e te ara, takatū, ko rā, e rongo, e whakarira, ake, kia ranga, kia tēna, tēna haumea, huie, tai ki e.
All right, and on that note, look, I thank you all. This is our initial meeting. It may not have been as comprehensive as some of you may have anticipated, but believe me, to get to this meeting has been a huge effort. And I do absolutely appreciate you putting your hands up, the landowner representatives, Dion, the Department of Conservation, getting involved. You may not find that you have a lot to say at times, but listening to the conversation, I think there will be times when your input will be absolutely valuable. And we look forward to Mercury, obviously, because they're a big part of this as well with the river, and look forward to the nominations coming through from our iwi partners. So I do thank you, and this is the beginning of the journey for this committee, and I look forward to next week's meeting at Hauraki. Hopefully it goes as well. So those who have got time, please stay for what's going to happen. I'm not sure what will happen, but let's find out. So I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.